This implementation video will discuss the experience phase of integers and graphs through the lens of brain and mind in learning. And we will start from our syllabus, week 5, day 1. On this day, students will experience the concept of integers as well as be able to demonstrate how graphs can be developed and interpreted. We'll start out with integers, and we'll start with the definition of what an integer is. Not all students know what that term means, so not only will we provide a definition, but we will also provide examples. We will also be encouraging our students to take notes, as that is important for them learning this particular skill. Once we move on from the definition, we're going to talk about the rules for adding integers. We'll provide the rules as well as examples of those rules before we give students practice in a whole group setting with answering some basic addition problems for positive and negative numbers. In this particular setting, we are not concerned with their ability to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. We are simply concerned about their ability to practice this concept. So you'll notice that we're sticking with fairly simple small numbers, and we will do so throughout. And once we're done with the whole group setting, we'll go ahead and we'll move to a small group practice where students will have a little bit more time to add positive and negative numbers before coming back to the whole group and going over the answers. We'll do the exact same procedure with subtraction. We'll give the rules, we will provide the examples, and we'll do that same whole group practice that was on the last slide before we talk about this particular comic. After discussing addition and subtraction in terms of negatives, positive and negative numbers, the comic should make sense, and we'll discuss whether or not it makes sense and see how many students will be able to explain it. After we have that discussion, we'll go back to the small group practice, have students practice in those groups subtracting positive and negative whole numbers before coming back to the whole group and going over the answers. This is a fairly repetitive process. We're sticking with the 60-40 rule. 60% remains the same, so students get used to it, and 40% is a little bit different. So we'll go over the multiplication and division rules along with examples before we go back and allow students to practice this skill as a whole group. Same as before, make it fun, allow them to call out answers, and really try to engage them before we give them small group practice. In this case, we'd give them 2 different worksheets, multiplying and dividing integers, because the rules are the same for both. Let them work on those in the small group before coming back to the whole group and getting the answers and going over the answers together. Then we would do a little bit of independent practice with some mixed operations where students have to pay attention to the addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division sign before we move on to experiencing graphs. And when it comes to the graphs, we want to do the exact same thing. We want to go over the vocabulary. We want to explain what each portion of a graph is, point out exactly where they are located, and talk about what a graph looks like. Then we would talk about how you can plot points on a graph and talk about the coordinates, the x coordinate, the y coordinate, the ordered pair. And then we talk about how those plots are pointed, how to read the graph. And then we talk about the quadrants. Quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we would give students a whole group opportunity to plot the points themselves before we break off into some small group practice. What we would do is give them ordered pairs and a blank coordinate grid so that they could practice plotting their own points. There are a number of very fun graphs that students could do, and in this case we chose an Easter graph simply because it is spring.